Ο πρώτος ομιλητής μας είναι ο καθηγητής Benjamin Laker. Είναι καθηγητής ηγεσίας στο Henley Business School, διακεκριμένος συγγραφέας άρθρων στο Harvard Business Review, μεταξύ άλλων. Έχει μελετήσει το θέμα της επιρροής και του ζητήσαμε να μας το αναπτύξει με την έννοια της επιρροής, τα κρίσιμα ερωτήματα, επιρροή προς τα πάνω, προς τα κάτω, προς όλες τις κατευθύνσεις και να το συζητήσουμε με ζωντανά παραδείγματα. Μετά την ομιλία του, περίπου 40 λεπτά θα είναι η ομιλία του, θα έχουμε ένα 20 λεπτό, 25 λεπτό για ερωτήσεις και συζήτηση και στη συνέχεια θα περάσουμε κατευθείαν στο πρώτο μας πάνελ με διακεκριμένους Έλληνες επιχειρηματίες, όπου θα συζητήσουμε πάλι για την επιρροή στο πλαίσιο των ελληνικών επιχειρήσεων. Άρα, είναι μεγάλη μου χαρά. It's a great pleasure to have Benjamin Laker with us, Professor of Leadership at Henley. Benjamin, we're all yours.
Thank you so much. I am a professor of leadership from the UK, and I didn't have to explain that to my taxi driver this morning because I had to ask him what the big, beautiful, yellow, warm thing was in the sky. You know, we don't really have much of that where I'm from. Every time I come to Greece, I want to stay here. I think it's a fantastic place. But I need to learn the art of influencing on my family. I haven't quite mastered that level yet. I still need to work on them. But today we're here to talk about your mastery of influence at the intersection of leadership. So, hands up if you think you already are quite an influential person. No need to be humble, it's okay. You're in the room, you've got a leadership mandate. I think most of you are already quite influential. You hold positions of authority. People look to you. You have trusted budgets. You're expected to do important things. I think it's a fair conclusion that we can make that you already are quite influential. Now, the key question around influence, particularly at the intersection of leadership, is what happens when you leave the room? Okay? When you enter the room, the influence is there. You have budget, you have mandate, you have a nice job title. People respect who you are, what you want to do. But when you leave the room, what happens to that influence? For many organizations, when the most senior person in the organization leaves the room, so does the influence. And that's because senior leaders can assume that their authority is influence. They can assume because of their job title, because of their size of budget, because of the responsibilities that have been endowed to them by their organization, that by default they are influential. And it may be that we think that is true, and our own reality is we are very influential. Just like me, when I go home, I think, I must be influential, let me try and convince my family to move to Mykonos. And my family say, absolutely not, it's too hot. That's because influence is not your reality. It is within somebody else's. You can think that you're influential all you like. If the people around you don't think that, you are not influential. And for leaders particularly, this is a paradox because authority is loud. And so when we enter a room, we can think we're very influential. People do as we say. Things are happening inside this organization, and I am the catalyst. But if you were to tomorrow strip the job title, strip the budget, strip the responsibility, would things still happen? And that is the difference between authority and influence. To understand more about this, I have undertaken some research, but clearly not enough research yet to convince my family to come to Mykonos with me. Some of the findings, you can find these in Harvard Business Review, Strengthen Your Ability to Influence People. What I wanted to look at here was specifically the intersection between influence and leadership because of the paradox that authority can have when we may think something is influential, but actually it's authoritarian. So we looked at much of the work that has taken place within this area, and we asked many questions. We spoke to lots of people to ascertain what is the reality? What is it that leaders can do to actually be influential long after they've left the room? And we found some very interesting things. Influence is not a binary construct. It's not as simple as saying, yes, this person is influential, or no, they're not. It's actually about where they are influential and the trade-offs and the impacts of those trade-offs. So for all intensive purposes, just so we are clear about what influence is and what it's not. It is not authority. It is not the mandated responsibility enthroned upon you as an important person in your organization. It is actually your ability to shape the attitudes, the mindset, the beliefs of those around you, without necessarily relying on formal authority. In the video at the very beginning, it said something very important. Influence without command. Do you remember the rest? Were you listening? Influence without command, but with inspiration. Which was a nice tee-up to this slide. It's about not necessarily relying on the formal authority. That's not to say you can't use formal authority, but influence should be strong enough that you don't need to rely on formal authority. It is not what some people would like to think a born trait. I was just born influential. Well, that's not entirely true, because specifically in a leadership domain, it's about how you construct the realities of other people, and if they come to the conclusion that you are not influential, then you're not, whether you think that you're born a certain way or you're not. What that means is anybody can learn it. Because actually, it's about learning the techniques, the tools, the frameworks that allow you to be perceived as influential in somebody else's reality. That's a strategic behavior that you can learn. And like anything that you learn, whether it be a language, whether you are a swimmer or you play golf, you have to keep doing it. You can't just decide, I am now a great swimmer. You have to go regularly. Or, I can now play golf and never practice. So, I've talked about different areas, different domains. This is what I mean by this. You as a leader find yourself in a very complex, challenging place. I don't have to describe to you what that feels like. It feels difficult. But why? And it's because we have competing priorities. And specifically, competing priorities can be considered in these 4 domains. We have always a bigger fish or the bigger dog. There's always somebody that we have to answer to, that holds us account, specifically somebody who may have more perceived power than we do. Our seniors. Then, to the side of us, we have peers, people who may hold similar responsibilities, similar mandates. They've had a similar experience to us, but they are not those who lead us or manage us, and indeed they are not who we lead either. They are peers, they are camaraderies, they are compatriots. This is lateral. Then we have followers. These could be direct headcount, people that we lead, people who we manage. It could also be junior colleagues in an organization that look to us for inspiration. Again, you can't decide who your followers are. Followers have decided to follow you. So you might say, well, I've only got 3 people in the organization who I manage. Those are the 3 people I need to care about. What if there's 300 people that look to you in times of crisis for inspiration? You are their source of influence, whether you have decided that or not. In their reality, you are the influential person. All eyes are on you. Those are followers. Then we have external to the organization. This is for you to define. It could be the media, could be the regulator, could be the recruitment consultant, could be anybody in a value chain. It's outside of the organization. So you have 4 competing priorities. The question, are you influential, is actually only the first half of a question. Are you influential in each of these 4 areas? And that is where influence and leadership intersect. So let's now go through each of these 4 areas, and within which I'm going to give you some tactical advice that you can take away to hone and strengthen your ability to influence within each of those areas. So we begin with the first one. We are influencing up. Now, we can't use formal authority here because individuals may have more formal authority than us. So it's difficult. We're trying to engage. What are we trying to do? Well, in this type of dynamic, we're trying to build rapport, gain trust, possibly get buy-in for something that we wish to do, maybe secure additional resource because there's never enough to go around. Stay invisible. Number of things. Ultimately, we are trying to get a yes. We're trying to get buy-in from a perceivably more senior level authority than us. Now, operating at this level is very difficult. I like to think of it as altitude. And the higher in an organization you climb, the thinner the air is. What that means is, if you are communicating and you are trying to engage with a perceivably more senior authority than yourself, you have to use clarity, fewer words. If you're trying to get a strategy across, what is it in its most simplistic form? Communicating with clarity at altitude is the answer to trying to secure engagement with a senior authority. That could allow you to do things such as market expansion and getting your buy-in, perhaps framing restructure. You're there at the table because you are wanting to do something, but you need the buy-in. So communicate what the outcome is. What value is it going to bring? Not necessarily the detail. So your job, when you're communicating at that level, is to be legible at the altitude. To think about that. The messaging that you're trying to convey at that senior table needs to be simplistic enough that it can be understood and bought in. So, audience participation time, because I know it's a little bit warm. So, hands up, have you ever left a meeting with senior partners and you have thought, wow, I felt that would have gone better. They just didn't get it. Hands up if that's ever been you, and I will go first. Happens to me all the time. And I'm supposed to teach this stuff, and it happens to me all the time. Yeah, it's really frustrating. But that's because we ourselves have been convinced that it's a very easy buy-in. But at the higher altitude, clearly, we haven't communicated with clarity. How many of you remember seeing the movie Inception? Remember Inception? Yeah, okay. So Inception actually is a really good learning point here. If you remember in Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio, the idea of the premise of the movie is you have to take a construct in its most simplistic form in order to embed within the human brain. The brain will reject it if it is not simplistic enough. So when you're communicating at altitude, the same thing applies. Your idea needs to be so simple and powerful enough that it can be immediately understood, and the ramifications and the details can be an afterthought. Communicate with clarity at altitude. Another analogy I like to bring is a diamond. Your communication at this level should be like a diamond. It's not a Rihanna reference. A diamond is strong. It can cope with scrutiny. That's how your message should be. It's also small enough to travel within the organization and stay the same. That's how your message should be. It's also quite desirable and nice to look at. That's how your message should be. Communicating at altitude, every word counts. So, an example. Now, caveat to this, I could also do another lecture on the dystopian future of Amazon, but we're not going to do that today. Here, I'm talking about clarity of messaging. Jeff Bezos is a good example of this. Recently, when he stepped down from Amazon, everybody thought, what's the final message going to be? How is he going to convey this seminal moment? Now, you might expect a dossier, a huge movie, 20 pages. They didn't receive that. All they received was a single memo with a single line. Remember to operate just like it's day one. That's the message. Because embedded within the message is a warning and a danger against bureaucracy. But it doesn't need to give the danger. It's evident in the single line. The single line, just like the movie Inception, that idea I can now run with and I can operate at scale with. That's a message that's memorable. Even when you, as the messenger, leave the room, it's easy to remember. The ramifications can be considered afterwards. So think, when you're operating at scale, how you can do similar things. 3 things that I would advise you could do. Think about Inception, or think about those diamonds. Lead with the most simplistic, most powerful, potent version of what you are trying to ascertain. If you're trying to restructure, for what? What's the outcome? What's the desired state that you are actually trying to sell? It's not the restructure you're trying to sell, it's the outcome. What is that? Is that efficiency savings? Is that productivity highs? Is that motivation? What are you selling? And remember, when you are engaging at that level, it's already assumed that you work hard. So it's not about starting the conversation. I have spent hours on this. I hope you like it. Well, it's assumed that's your job. You have to spend hours on these things. And it's not about hoping you like it. It's about the message. So that's managing up. We now move managing sideways or lateral influence, where we're looking to engage. These are peers, these are camaraderies. These may be individuals who look to us in times of need and us to them. We don't manage these individuals, we don't lead them. Maybe they have similar struggles to us. So why would you be engaging with these individuals? Maybe to build alliances. Maybe together you're trying to do joint projects. Maybe you have this functionality beneath you that both of you need to work together to resolve. It's very important, particularly for the future, for you to build long-standing relationships with peers, particularly as they themselves may progress within an organization. Some examples. Trying to bring people together. Maybe you're managing conflict. Maybe you need some political cover. Importantly, in times of plenty, you should always invest time and energy in peer collaboration, because when the storms come, these are the relationships that matter. When those storms come, you need those peers. Otherwise, leadership is such an isolated event. You don't want to be an island. It's about building the trust. So, second question. How many of you have tried to do that? So you're working with peers and maybe you're picking up the phone when there's issues and you're giving support and motivation, but actually there's a trade-off. There's only so far you can go because I only have so many minutes in a day. So how many hands up have we got here? Okay, yeah, quite a lot. Because when you have sunshine, somebody else may be having rain, and it's their storm. If you choose to invest your time now, they will remember that. And when darkness comes here, and sunshine is over here, and they have available resource and time and energy and motivation to help, they will. But if you haven't invested energy with them, maybe they won't. Richard Branson is a really good example of somebody who was willing to spend countless resource, time, energy on sustaining and building and developing lateral influence. For him, it was very important that peers align, because together you can create more than you can sustain individually. And from his perspective, the more that you can enhance those peer networks to support each other, the more your influence grows. Because remember, peer influence cannot, by definition, be based upon authority. You don't have authority over these individuals. You're not more senior than them. Therefore, the relationships that you are building supersedes any authority that may exist. Maybe one day they become a CEO in another organization, and now you have a trusted ally. And so, for this reason, it's very important to invest your time and energy and your resource in peer influence. 3 things for you to try. These are some suggestions, both from our research, but also from Branson himself. Be willing, this is very bold, to promote a peer who maybe has even outperformed you. Don't be trying to hide that away. Be willing to be bold enough to do that. Not only will they remember and forevermore cite you as somebody who has helped them, but also it demonstrates how authentic you are. If the peer has already outperformed you, why are you worried? The action has already happened. So at this point, the only decision you can make is, 1, I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen. Or, I'm going to benefit from this myself, and I'm going to promote them because it allows me to demonstrate how authentic I am. It helps me It helps them. Why would we not? But of course, it's nervous, I know. Sometimes when there's conflict in an organization, a way to disarm conflict and reduce it is by recognizing it and then thinking, well, we're both very interested in this subject, in this outcome. Why don't we work together? We're clearly very vested in this. And the conflict exists because we both care. Let's work together on this. And what you will see then is a complete disarmament and a real opportunity to build something strong. And that's what people will remember. They remember the willingness to co-construct in times of conflict. And they will remember the times that you promoted, even when it looked as though it could outshine us. Thirdly, now we're focusing on our downward influence. These are people that either look to us, they are followers, or maybe we manage them directly. So this is much more developmental than the influence that we've talked about so far. What are we trying to do here? Create discretionary effort. And discretionary effort is how you know you are influential when you leave the room. Employees are actually going above and beyond the call of duty to make things happen. Not just because you have asked, but because they want to. That's what discretionary effort is. You can also begin to create succession strength. Like it or not, you are a leader today, but the people who we look after are going to be leaders tomorrow. And they will always remember, the same way that we remember the leaders who developed us. But what do you want to be remembered for? For helping or hindering? And that's why it's very important. Be willing to give them opportunities to grow and develop under you. Some examples. Maybe you're bringing your team together on a high-risk project that other people in the organization perhaps think they're not quite ready for. When you are coaching these individuals, it's not about what you would do in their situation. Too many times those conversations begin, well, when I was at your stage, this is what I did. Actually, it's about prompting questions. Well, if you did that, what would happen? And if you did that, what do you think might happen? And if you did this, what do you think might happen? And what you find is the individual will arrive at a conclusion themselves. Not because you have told them, but because you have nurtured them and you've nudged them to form their own conclusion. They will remember that. And they will remember that for a long time. So, your people, you're spending a lot of time and energy with them. Hands up if sometimes you wonder whether they're actually developing at all. Yeah, a couple, yeah. There's some very honest people in the room. Some. Now, this is challenging, I know. I have this problem also myself. One of the best ways that you can grow and enhance people was utilized by Barack Obama. He would hire talented people around him and then try and provide the most growth opportunities possible. This is also the same way that you will learn to drive a car or fly a plane. You need to experience ever more complex scenarios, either in real life or by simulation, so that you can advance the skills that you have. Remember, when you're driving a car, you can't learn every possible scenario in which you will find yourself in. It's not possible. But you will learn to reach a point in time where you are confident that no matter what happens, if a child steps out in front of a road, if your lights go off, if there's a crash, that you are confident enough of a driver that you will be okay. And in that moment, whatever it is, you will do the right thing. Similarly with pilots, you can't simulate every possible crisis scenario, but you can simulate them to a point where they have enough confidence, doesn't matter what happens, I'll deal with it. Same as leadership. And so in order to translate that for your people, they also need experiences. They need stretch and challenge. So delegation is one of the best ways you can do that. Delegation is actually a gift that you can give. You delegate things not because I just don't want to do that today. No, you're delegating opportunities for people that if they then accomplish the task, one, they have been stretched and challenged, and two, they have the praise and the success and the admiration that goes with that. Think back to Richard Branson. You've now shone the light on someone in your team. And that is why Obama actually said, you delegate what scares you, the big tasks. Because with the big task comes the big reward. You're there as a support mechanism. It's not about you just disappearing and being invisible, but you're willing to offer them the opportunity to tackle it, for them to step up. Of all of the influencing types, this one is the most scalable. Because you can't scale upwards, and you can't scale sideways, but downwards you can. Because you can scale an individual, and then they will tell somebody else, and then they will tell somebody else, and they will tell somebody else. And this, to use John Cotter's language, is your guiding coalition. Anybody use Cotter's 8-step model? Yeah. When he talks about the guiding coalition, it doesn't actually say how you get it. Well, this is how you can. You're building influence at scale so that when you wish to undertake large transformation projects, you don't have to look around to find a coalition. They're already there. They're the people that you've worked with and you've been willing to spend time, coach, and develop. Now, we've spent some time thinking internally. Now it's time to think externally. What are you trying to do here? You're trying to be visible. You're trying to think about how the market sees you. Maybe you're building trust with regulators, with partners, maybe with public opinion. Someone very importantly said, influence in this level is not about who you know. It's about who knows you. I wish that was mine, but it's not, okay? Who knows you? So when you're getting media requests and you get that warm feeling, you think, well, that's nice. Stop and think, is this necessary? Is this value adding for me? Or is this something that just feels a little bit nice? Now, there's nothing wrong with the external world, but there are many opportunities, too many that you can also say yes to. And the more effective you are, the more willing you are to say no to the opportunities that do not enhance the right visibility for you. Because appearing in the wrong places is not a good return on your investment of time. It's better to say no than to say yes to something that dilutes your brand. It's better to say nothing than to say the wrong thing. It's better to appear nowhere than everywhere. So, how many of you have been spending time and energy into building an external presence, but you're not quite clear exactly what that's for? Hands up. I knew this would be the one question that people would be like, oh, I don't want to answer that. But I think you know inside. Sometimes you just want an external presence, okay, but where? With whom? Is this with media? Is this with the regulator? Is this with recruitment consultants? Is this with another competitor? Like, where do you want to be known, and for what purpose? So Oprah Winfrey is a good example of somebody who says, you can't be everywhere at once, and nor should you want to be. You just got to be known for the thing that you want to be known for. You have to decide that. And then you broadcast that. Therefore, if you receive opportunities that fall outside of your core message, you should say no. It will strengthen what it is that you are about. So, 3 things for you to try in this regard. What is your story in its most simplistic, Inception-esque form? And get it right. Because if you don't, somebody else's reality is already describing who you are, what you are about, and what you do. So you should own it. It's your story. It's not about broadcasting to the world. It's about going one trusted ally at a time. So if, for example, there's an individual that you have sought out, maybe they're a competitor, maybe it's a media person or a regulator, you don't transmit to the whole world and hope that they just find out about you. No, you work out a path to that person. This is somebody I know who knows this person, who knows this person, who knows them. That's what I need to do. So now I just focus my time and effort and commitment into establishing those trusted allies who can open those doors. I don't need to be everywhere, I just need to be here. Now, as we start to wrap up, one thing is an uncomfortable truth. I've given you the model, but you can't do all the 4 things at the same time. And this is why it's hard, and that's why it's the job of a leader to decide where you invest your energy, your time, and your resource. You can't influence all at the same time because they are trade-offs. For example, sometimes you need to just focus up, and you need to manage those expectations and those pressures. And you spend time with the seniors. And of course, if my seniors are over here and I'm spending more time visually, the further I am away from my team. So now my team think, oh, they just want to be really senior. They've forgotten about us. They just want to schmooze with the important people. But of course, if I then spend time with my team, the seniors might think they're not senior enough. They just want to be in the team just with slightly more remuneration. We don't see them as strategic. So it's a trade-off. You can't be in 2 places at the same time. Sometimes you need to be in your team and leading from the front, but then your peers will feel like you've ignored them. It's a trade-off. That's why it's hard. And sometimes you need to be externally very visible, and then everybody internally will start to think, what's your motivation here? Where are you? Where is your head at? And that's why it's really difficult. There is no optimum balance. I can only give you one example to study. It's about making choices. So Zhang Ruimin was the CEO of Haier, a big corporation in China, the largest white goods manufacturer in the world. And I have one slide on this. There's lots of books written. If you're interested, go and have a look. But essentially, they decided, rather than have those 4 domains, for them, they were willing to sacrifice influence at the senior level and move it down towards both their managers and employees by restructuring their entire organization into micro enterprises. A big decision. The way that Zhang Ruimin did this, and to convince the board, the simple idea, the Inception-esque idea, was simply this. What if our employees and our customers were the same people? Interesting question. It's not actually Zhang Ruimin's idea. It's the same question that Wikipedia can ask. It's the same question that Facebook can ask. It's the same question that Uber can ask. Because you can drive an Uber and you can be a rider. You can edit Wikipedia and also read Wikipedia. And you can create content on Facebook and also enjoy it. It's a platform. So one simple idea radicalized an entire organization to be completely deconstructed. The results, very famous, speak for themselves. Lots of impact because they were willing to be closer to the customer. But in order to do that, they recognized that they needed to move some of their domain of influence that existed at the top level into the bottom level. So, to end, it's not what you're born with or what you bring to the room. It's what is there when you leave it. It's not your personality. It's how you make others feel. And it's definitely not who you know, it's who knows you. You have choices to make in each of those 4 domains. I can't sit here and stand and tell you what the right decision is. Only you know that. You have to invest tactically, and you have to decide to what end. But as you do that, my final slide, go forward, think with clarity. If you're communicating at altitude, think about Inception. Think about the diamond. Your message has to travel far and wide and be the same and have consistency. But it has to be beautifully simplistic. Be willing to be authentic and give credit to other people. They will remember that, even if you don't. And they will hold you up as a shining example of somebody who has helped them and naturally want to repay that time and time again. And then lastly, the Obama idea. Be willing to delegate what scares you. You're going to create enormous moments in other people's career. And as we know, when we think about our own career, we only remember moments. So be remembered. If you wish to connect after this, please do. I've got some details up here. Also, all of the ideas that have been included within the presentation you can find not in front of a paywall, but it's all free to access. Thank you again for listening, and please do remember, influence, it's not what you brought in to the room, it's what's there when you have exited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benjamin, for a very nice model to understand influence, delivered, if I may say, in impeccable BBC-like English. So thank you for this, for the clarity of language, and the clarity of your thinking. If you don't mind, can you go back to your model, please? Because this is the crux of the presentation, and I would like to ask to to focus on it.
Do you want me to do that?
Can we go back to the presentation? Yeah.
There we go.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. I think we can perhaps revisit some of it. If I can begin, by the way, if you can please, as you know, you can always ask a question verbally, or you can ask a question through the Inventora, whatever suits you. I will make a start with a couple of questions to our speaker, and then I will hand the floor to you if you have any questions. So, Benjamin, one of the things I love the idea. There are quite a few things that I like in your presentation. One is a very simple idea. What happens after you leave the room? So to be mindful of this, I think this is absolutely critical. It's the essence, in a sense, of influence, which has nothing to do with positional power. It is about the aura of influence one has. And in all this model, I see there's a common thread, it seems to me, and I would like to check this with you. There's a sense of you are inviting people, leaders, to have a sense of self-denial to some extent. That is, to be humble enough to give credit to others so that they can draw others to them. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because ultimately, and we can think of some leaders either in organizations or on the political stage, who if you ask the question of them, am I influential? They would say, yes, very much so. But actually, if others around you don't believe that to be the case, then there is zero influence. And what you may find is when that leader exits a room, the room feels very different, and the motivation evaporates, the clarity of thought evaporates, maybe even dysfunctionality then increases, because they think, actually, we're not really going to do that. Let's not work together on that at all. But yet, like you say, people are willing to follow humility and authenticity. A lot of the work from scholars in this field will show you that people are willing and lining up to follow authenticity. And so, by you allowing and inviting people around you to assume that you are influential, that makes you influential.
Thank you. I have already a couple of questions. I have some more, but I will give priority to the questions people are asking. Now, what happens when you are trying to build leadership and coaching with your follower and hit the wall of the work-life balance?
It's very difficult, and work-life balance could probably have a huge talk on its own. With any obstacle in an individual's life, I think you just have to be mindful of what that individual is experiencing. So, for example, you may have people in your team, these people have children and these people do not. That's a very different lived experience. And often with leadership, it's about a tailored response. It's not necessarily lowering expectations, but it's just being mindful that this person's work-life balance will inevitably be different from this person, given that they have a different lived experience. I'm going to hold them to the same accountability framework as my job as a leader, but I'm also going to have a different appreciation of what they can both bring into my team. The same way, for example, a sports coach may treat players quite differently based upon the value that they can add at any given moment. So I would say there is no one-size-fits-all, but you as a leader have to invest the time and the energy to understand the experiences and the work-life balance of everybody in your team and to try and accommodate where possible.
In your experience, what kind of approaches have you seen? How do people tend to handle this?
A lot of it will depend upon the organizational framework itself. So, for example, if you have an organization that is already engaged with flexible working, then it becomes much easier to be able to have accommodations than an organization, say, that has no accommodations at all. So if you have the accommodations, it's pretty easy. If you don't, it's about then thinking what micro accommodations that you can control within your own team that not necessarily are visible with outside of the team, but within your domain, what things could you do? And that might be assigning certain projects. If, for example, you have clients that are international and those calls are happening at different times in different time zones, be mindful who you are assigning that task to based upon the experiences of individuals. You might find that people have different preferences, so perhaps before just assigning the task, think and talk to, well, who could this work with best and align with their work-life balance as it is today?
As you know, influence is a very tricky concept because it can be easily misconstrued as manipulation.
Yes.
So I have a very interesting question here for you. In your experience, what's the most ethical way to use influence to drive change without manipulating or coercing others? And how do you personally draw that line?
I think the first one is being clear on what the outcome of any initiative is. Because if we are clear from the outset about what the destination is, that will help a long way. I think a lot of the challenge and criticism will be, you explained to me that we were going to do this for X reason, but actually that wasn't the truth. It was for Y reason. So firstly, be clear about why we're doing this activity. And then second, behaviorally along the journey, don't demonstrate any coercive behavior. Delegation, as I mentioned earlier, is a great way to demonstrate that because it shows you being willing to allocate tasks to other people for you to publicly appraise them. That goes very against manipulative and coercive behavior because it appears to be authentic. And if that's authentic, what you will then start to see is the mindset that you are in. You will start to see other authentic behaviors flow, maybe the way that you communicate, that you send emails, that speak to people. And very quickly, the eyes upon you will conclude, this person is sincere, this person is genuine. Therefore, even if the direction of travel that we're going on isn't something that we want to do, at least they are leading us in a way that is fair and honorable.
Okay. One more question is, you said it's not about who you know, but who knows you. Is recognition itself enough to determine a person's value?
It will depend on how an individual actually constructs their own identity and constructs their own value. So it may be dependent upon what that individual is aspiring to do next, that they need external vision. But external from where? Is that because they want to impress a new boss, a recruitment consultant, the media? Everybody has their own individual agendas. And for some people, they do seek validation externally. That's okay. I think most of us admit that we need some level of validation. Where it can become problematic is where it can go too far. And that's actually where we delve into dark triad tendencies like Machiavellianism and specifically narcissism, where you are only seeking validation externally because you have such a small valuation upon your own identity.
And another question is, how do you deal with influence? How do you engage? How do you exercise influence to your people when things are bad internally? For example, cost cutting, unknown future in the sector, and motivation is low. So when things are not quite right, exercising influence is more important but more difficult. How does one handle this?
So when motivation is low, it's typically referred to as a state of resigned inertia. And that's where you might have change fatigue, you may have people who are withdrawn, maybe depressed. They're not motivated. So, when you're trying to bring people together in that state, you have to do two things. Firstly, you need to increase the intensity of the state. But if you do that too quickly, you can create toxic environment and pushback. So you also need to add in some positivity. So what you're trying to do is actually picture an opportunity. And if you can present to these individuals a desired state that's an opportunity, wow, we can go and achieve this thing together. We may have to go through cost cutting, but let me paint a picture of you about what the destination will look like. It means we can do these things, these things, these things, and these things. Together, as a team, we can depart and go on this experience together. What you're trying to do is sell them the journey and the destination at the end. And you're explaining that the journey and the destination is actually more exciting, more fun, more impactful than just existing in their current status quo. And if you can sell them the journey, then they will come with you.
Can you be a bit more specific about ways of influencing depending on context? For example, one of the question is small companies, big companies, startups or mature companies. I'm sure there will be different ways of exercising influence in a startup vis-a-vis a state organization, vis-a-vis a company which has been around for a long time. Do you see in your research, in your experience, do you see any meaningful differences?
There is differences in terms of what's available to scope and scale. So for example, if you're in a small enterprise, the opportunities to create, stretch, and challenge are more readily available because there's fewer people. So perhaps one day you can be responsible for all of marketing, and then the next day you can now be responsible for all of marketing and operations, and also take strategy as well. Just take the whole thing. Whereas in a large conglomerate or corporation, it is unlikely that you will be able to rapidly increase your job scope or your mandate scope. So there are differences there. Of course, on the other side, in a startup, it's unlikely you're ever going to experience the governance levels that you would inside a large organization. These will be typically absent because it's a startup. Over here, you're getting more used to political power and nuance and how to navigate governance structures. So it's recognizing that there are pros to each of these types of organizations, but there are also limitations. Someone from a startup is used to very agile working, but actually, can they work in a very democratic way? That means that they have to seek consensus when making decisions. Versus this person over here who is used to all of that, but maybe there's questions about, could they actually do it in a startup? Can they operate very quickly and rapidly? And so there are benefits, and there are opportunities for you to help influence these people to grow and develop, but also be mindful. It's like I can drive the car on the right-hand side. I may also struggle to drive it on this side. I haven't experienced it yet.
Before I give the floor to anybody who may want to ask a question orally, can you please elaborate, this is a fascinating question, on the differences and similarities between social media influence and your understanding of influence? I mean, the very word influencer has entered our vocabulary in the last 10 years, probably. So, it gives it a different twist, different meaning.
Yes.
So how the way we use influencer and social media influence, how does it differ from your understanding of influence?
Yeah, I think it's a terrible word. And actually, social media influencer really is a social media monetizer. Because what you're trying to do is to create content that's monetizable. That's actually what you're doing. So you may hear social influencers say, well, I influence trends, and I influence people to make purchases. Yes, you're monetizing. You're trying to create content that means that you earn, either because the post itself will earn you money, or because of the sales. So you could argue, yes, there is some level of influence because you are manipulating people to either hold an opinion or buy a product that ultimately helps you financially. With inside an organization, you are doing similar things. You are shaping attitudes, mindsets, beliefs without formal authority, but you're doing so in a way that means even after you leave, an organization is in a good, ethical place. If social media turns off tomorrow, what is a social media influencer? Unemployed. So that, to me, is the difference. One is built upon a platform for monetization, and one is sustainable and built on actual human relationships that are mutually constitutive.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Yeah, κυρία στο βάθος.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Benjamin, for your inspirational speech. I feel, because we are most of us here leaders in the room, that there is a sensitivity and a fine line between authority and influence, because authority sometimes leads to fear, and fear is an enemy of innovation. So I would like to hear your thought, how can we balance this, given that the authority goes with the title, but influence has to be around and vice versa. Thank you.
And you will find that the more senior you become, research will suggest the more fearful you are about the day that will eventually come when the authority either leaves you or you choose to leave the authority. And that's why so many people have problems with retirement. And this idea, well, I have to be doing something because how else am I going to generate my self-worth and what is my identity? Even if you meet, say, a retired pilot, hello, who are you? Well, I was a pilot. Okay, well, who are you now? Well, I was a pilot. Like, okay, but you're not now, so what are you? They don't have a construction over their identity. So, firstly, it's okay to be fearful about the authority. It's a privileged position to be, and you've worked really hard to get it. So that's okay. It's about being mindful that you're not driven to do things purely out of the fear of losing it. Because if you have fear of losing something, you're going to behave in a manner that stifles the growth and innovation of others. Far better to reach a point of acceptance that today I am here, but what I am experiencing is finite. And a nice analogy, when you enter an organization and you're doing the job that you're doing, imagine that you're carrying a precious vase and you're holding the vase. Now, you don't own that vase, but you're holding the vase. That's your leadership responsibility. And it's nice, and the longer you hold the vase, you look at the vase, and you might even start to think, well, the vase is kind of mine, but it's not. One day, just as somebody gave you the vase to hold, you have to give the vase to the next person to hold, because the organization needs to outlive you as an individual. Your legacy is whether you can hand over the vase in a better condition than the person who gave it to you. If it's smashed to pieces and it's got cracks and dents and you hand that over, your legacy isn't going to be what you want it to be. So it's okay to be fearful, but one day the day will come that you hand over the vase, and that's the day you will finally know whether you built the influence or not. Because at that day, when you step back, you either are going to have so many opportunities. People want to work with you. They remember what you did for them, and you have phone calls and emails, come and work with us, come and do this, come and do that. Or it's going to be silent. So that's what I would be more fearful of. not losing your authority today, but fearful of the day that when you do give it up, what's next?
Thank you. One more, perhaps final question from the floor? No? I have one, however, which just came up. Again, interesting question. Is influence a democratic process in a business organization? I guess the distinction here is business organizations tend to be hierarchical.
Yeah.
Democracy is not hierarchical. So when we're talking about influence, are we talking about a democratic process in an otherwise hierarchical system?
It could be. I think it really depends upon the output of the influence. So for example, if at committee you're looking to delegate things through a defined democratic process, then it could be argued that it is democratic. If you are coaching somebody to become a successor for a role that they do not yet even know exists, then you have taken that upon yourself to enact that level of influence, and therefore it wouldn't necessarily be democratic because you have decided this person needs developing, and therefore I'm going to develop that person or influence that person for a role that they might not yet exist. So it can be both. Ultimately, your job as a leader is to decide where you wish to apply your influence, in what setting, democratic or not.
Is there a connection between charisma and influence?
There can be, particularly with people, as the earlier question, who are able to manipulate and coerce, because often individuals follow charisma, even though they realize that when you look at history books, some of the most charismatic people who have ever lived have been some of the worst. So there is a fine line between being influenced by a charismatic individual and discerning what actually is apparent. Is this simply charisma, or is this hard-earned influence? And often I think if you get a feeling about a person that this is slightly too good to be true, then it probably is. And they're leading with charismaticness and their charisma as opposed to genuine influence.
And a final question, Benjamin. The influence is a concept which is obviously relevant in business, but also outside business. And I would like you to offer your reflections on influence in a family, influence in a school. When I teach my students, I'm not necessarily influential. Again, as a father, I'm not necessarily influential when I approach my kids and I would like them to act in a certain way. Are there any analogies and any lessons one can take both ways, either from a family school context to take to business, or from business to take to family in a school context?
Well, I think often, and if you've got kids, you will know this, you might have very strong views about what your kids should do, and they have the complete opposite view. So often, you can try and fight against that, and you will see huge pushback. Similarly, within an organization, you might have a view on something, and actually, there is enormous pushback. And the more that you push back, the tension is more. And so in a family setting, what you could do is then say, okay, I will let you hold that position. And I'm going to allow you to do that without coercion. And you just wait. Because if the position that you hold, you actually think is a position that you need them to hold, you create the environment for them to figure it out themselves. And often, if you don't fight against it, but you simply create the conditions, maybe you say, okay, if you think that's the right idea, maybe go and do it. See what happens. Try that. Similarly, within an organization, if you think, actually, that's the change that you want to make, why don't you try that and then come and tell me what happens? You're giving them the license to do it, and with that license, either the individual in the family or the organization might then think, maybe I shouldn't be so certain in this. And even if they then go ahead and do that activity or follow that path, you might then see a return back. And the relationship and the influence will be far stronger because you allowed them to go and do it their way. They needed that time, but then they came round to your way of thinking. So I'll give you an example just in relation to that. When I was 10, my dad knew everything in the whole world, yeah? Every single thing. When I was 13, he didn't know anything. When I was 16, he was just embarrassing. When I was 40, he knew everything. Because he allowed me the space to then recognize and think, actually, maybe you do know some things. And then now, of course, he knows everything. So it's all about my reality.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you very much for the richness of your ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you.